Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam,
Hi, my name is Safira.
and our other group members are JJ, Nalini, Deborah, and Gabby. We're part of the Youth Leadership Institute at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum. Our community action project, where we research a topic we're passionate about and seek to make change about, is the school-to-prison pipeline.
The school-to-prison pipeline is a national trend of pushing children out of the classroom and towards juvenile and criminal justice systems. These students are often criminalized from a young age and are not allowed to showcase their potential, which usually leads them through a pipeline straight to prison. The zero-tolerance policy is a policy for specific and consistent punishment when certain rules are broken regardless of reason or circumstance. It mostly affects minority students, and black male students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white male students in NYC. Many students under zero-tolerance policies are usually punished without a second thought, and this type of policy has been proven in research to have an overall negative effect on students.
As zero-tolerance policy increased, schools began to take on their own version of the broken window theory, which is the idea that if you crack down on smaller offenses, then more serious crimes are discouraged. When this was applied to the school setting, students were punished for actions that previously weren't accounted for, including detention for being disruptive, talking back, and skipping class.
These students often come from backgrounds of abuse, poverty, or neglect. Instead of receiving the appropriate resources and being offered opportunities and guidance, they are more likely prone to being punished and hurt.
This image here serves to put things into perspective quantitatively. One thing that's important to notice is the ratio of guidance counselors to school officers. The number of school safety personnel is almost double the number of guidance counselors, further representing how rather than supporting students, the school system is more likely to enforce disciplinary action.
In an American Psychological Association report, they found that school suspension in general appears to predict higher future rates of misbehavior and suspension among those students who are suspended. In the long term, school suspension and expulsion are moderately associated with a higher likelihood of school dropout and failure to graduate on time.
We created a survey consisting of 8 questions to determine how New York City students know about this topic. Members of our group distributed the survey to schools in every borough except Staten Island, and it was also pretty shocking. Out of the 60 responses received, 65% of the students had never even heard of the term school-to-prison pipeline. The question on our survey was whether students agree with the disciplinary actions implemented at their school. 48% did not know about the disciplinary actions implemented, while 23% did not agree with the policies. Another question was, what kind of resources does your school provide for students at risk of being inserted into the school-to-prison pipeline system? Over 50% of the responses replied with, I don't know, further indicating the lack of knowledge regarding the term and the resources available to students. When students were asked, are there any specific groups of students in your school that you see suffer of this issue? A large number of the responses were unsure. However, there were responses regarding minorities and students of color, specifically African American students. Thus, while it's evident that many students are unaware of who is impacted by this, those who are aware realize that students of color are disproportionately affected. To end our survey, we asked students about their opinions on the zero-tolerance policy or any other disciplinary policies that they are aware of and any alternatives they have. A popular answer amongst the responses was to take context into account. Each situation should be addressed separately, and discipline should be applied only when necessary and in extreme cases. Many answers emphasize the importance of positive reinforcement and encouragement rather than punishment.
In order for any change to occur, we must have a strategic plan. Currently, lawsuits and civil complaints against districts with zero tolerance are being filed. These complaints have brought more awareness to the subject of effective discipline. The Department of Education and the Department of Justice came together in 2015 and issued federal guidelines on how to improve student districts called the Guiding a Resource Guide for Improving Schools Climate and Discipline. Some themes of the guideline are to create a favorable school climate that helps prevent changes in appropriate behavior, making sure that there are appropriate and clear expectations and consequences, and creating ways to ensure fairness and equity for all the students no matter what.
Thank you for listening to our presentation, and if you have any questions, I think we have a little time to answer some.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Sarah and Safira. It looks like we're going to start with a question from Julia. She is wondering if you could speak a bit on how do you think we can affect the lack of knowledge so that change can be made?
I just have a question about the question being asked. What do you mean by affect the lack of knowledge? Like, how can we raise awareness about this?
Yeah, I think that's what Julie is asking. How can we sort of address what may be a lack of information that people are receiving so that we can actually get to real substantial change being made?
Before like this pandemic hit, we were like planning on holding panel discussions within schools, especially hit by this pipeline. So we were to communicate to the students what this term was and basically explain to them who's impacted, how they can receive the help that they need if they feel like they're not fairly treated by like the school system, and basically just reach out to students to just raise awareness about it.
Mm-hmm. We had a question from Medina Amber. And I think that this is relevant to what you guys are talking about too. What are some ways that high school students, you're talking about sort of direct each other. What are some ways that high school students can?
Safira, do you want to answer? Or do you want me to?
I'll go ahead. Some ways high school students can get involved is just doing research and trying to subject, because coming from me, I know many people in my school don't know about it, and I guess something as simple as like talking about it in school can raise more awareness about it. You can add on if you want to.
Yeah, I think in general, just basically just in general talking about what it even is and letting people know that there is this trend where students are more likely to be funneled into the criminal justice system. Just talking about it can have a large impact so that more people are aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much, Sarah and Safira. We're going to move on to Desiree, who's our second presenter for today's flash session. Desiree, are you all ready to share your screen?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
That if you double click Desiree's screen share, that will enlarge her presentation.
Shall I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desiree Guerrero, and I am a member of the Youth Leadership Institute at the Intrepid Museum. Today, I will be conducting a brief presentation on a very special community action project that my group and I have been working on. Our community action project is titled No Taxation Without Representation. This is an issue that exists today, affects us the youth, and should not be taken for granted. This issue prevents us from speaking our minds when it comes to choosing our representatives. One thing my partners and I agreed on was how teenagers can work and get taxed like adults while not being able to know or decide where this tax money is used to or collected for. We decided to further research and we gather data based on the responses of the students who attend the high schools my partners attend. We wanted to know how aware our youth is of this issue. Since we're taxed, we should be allowed to vote. Voting should be a basic human right. Preventing us from voting is not letting us be fully active citizens. Giving us the opportunity of voting will provide us with the opportunity of choosing our representatives and have a say in our government. 65% of students believe paychecks should be taxed. This is because our youth is aware of the importance of tax collection when it comes to government spending. We are taxed. This money is collected and used in different areas, such as public education, healthcare, and social security. But the issue is that when we're taxed, we don't get to decide where this money is applied to. 55% of students believe 5% is an adequate rate at which we should be taxed. This is because as adolescents, we should not be taxed like adults. Instead, we should have the opportunity to save this percent of our paychecks for our post-secondary education. 73% of students believe they're ready to vote. This data emphasizes how mature teenagers can be and how we should be granted the right to vote, because since we're taxed like adults, therefore we deserve the opportunity to vote as well. It's unfortunate how little of our paychecks are invested into public education. We are the future adults and leaders of our nation. Therefore, we deserve to count with the greatest amount of resources to get the best possible quality of education possible. We also recognize how this issue affects other groups and or minorities. Immigrants are also affected by this issue because the majority of them, being undocumented, pay taxes, but are still not able to vote. Last but not least, our point is we should be able to vote because it can be considered a natural human right. The United States Constitution was created on the belief of the existence of natural rights, civil liberties, and civil freedoms. We might as well be able to exercise them. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Now we will have a brief Q&A session, and if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Wonderful. Thank you, Desiree. If anyone has any questions for Desiree, please go ahead and type them into the chat, which you can find using the tab to the right of your screen. Desiree, we haven't gotten any questions yet, but we are getting responses thanking you for the presentation and remarking on how informative it is. Mica is wondering, do you know if there's anyone else that has a lower voting age?
Well, that is a really great question. I'm not really sure if this is going to answer your question, but in countries like the Dominican Republic, tax collection is important at very ages, at really several ages, since like students get to work, as soon as they get to work, they're supposed to pay taxes when it comes to things like supporting their homes and things like that. But the problem is that they're not allowed to vote until they turn 18. However, in some places in the Dominican Republic, kids are also allowed to pay taxes even though they're not granted the right to vote. Any more questions?
Wonderful. Megan C says, great presentation. Love the idea of having a lower voting age. Is there any way to support this idea and make it happen?
I believe that if we gather more data and receive more responses from different students around the city, and then we expand the survey nationwide, it's something that could definitely be achieved. We should come with the support of our states, and then we could also receive the support of the federal government and make this happen.
Wonderful. Gabrielle Cayenne says, could petitions also help with making this happen?
Absolutely. Our youth, our voice. If we speak our minds and stand up for issues like these that really matter, anything is possible. No problem.
And just giving another couple seconds just to make sure we've got all of the questions coming in. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Desiree. And we're going to move on to our final presentation for today's flash session. The next presentation is by Mica Le John, CEO and co-founder of ToSwim, a social messaging app with an emphasis on close connections and private communities. Thanks so much, Mica. And hearing you actually.
I was saying thank you so much to the youth who just presented. All the topics you talked about are very important for young people to be thinking about, and I'm very grateful to have heard about it. Today, I'm going to be talking about a toolkit that I'm working on with some other educators and professionals. If anyone wants to make the screen share larger, just double click on it. So what we're building is a toolkit to talk about the book Algorithms of Oppression. Now, before we dive into what the toolkit is, I'd love to know from all of you, what have you used in the last 24 hours of any of these apps or websites? If you can drop in the chat, I'd love to hear what you've used today or yesterday. Almost everything. Cool. So thank you all for sharing. Everything but Netflix. Everything but Netflix. Cool. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is this book that we are doing work on called Algorithms of Oppression. And I actually also have the book right here. So Algorithms of Oppression, as you can see, is this text written by Dr. Safiya Umoja Noble. She's an associate professor at UCLA here in California, where I am. And she does a lot of work into researching what she calls algorithmic oppression. Now, the first question we often have to ask when having this conversation is, what is an algorithm? The sort of official definition is that it is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculation or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. In the most simplistic terms, it is essentially a number of rules to create a system of sorting or bringing up results. How this book actually came to be made was that Dr. Umoja was, or Dr. Noble was babysitting, watching her daughter and a couple of young women who were probably in about their early teens. And she did a quick search around looking for content for young Black girls and came up with some really frightening results when she started searching it. And she actually used an example of a search on the cover of the book here. So asking the question, why are Black women so? And these are the results that Google gave her. Now, to give you a bit of background, I'm Mica. As Ife said, I'm CEO and co-founder of ToSwim. And ToSwim is a social messaging app. We're really focused on how we can support close connections and private communities. We're currently invite only for Black, Indigenous, and POC, LGBTQIA+, and or women-centric groups, creators, and brands. And so I spend a lot of time with my community and my users having these conversations about how do we actually mitigate the risks of algorithmic oppression. So I'm part of a team that's exploring how things like capital, race, and gender become factors in creating unequal conditions, and really thinking about how we can mitigate this. Algorithms of Oppression is a book that has actually started to create a bit of a movement. There's a working group all around the world based in San Francisco, Los Angeles. There are folks in New York and in Germany exploring these ideas through different projects. And the group that I'm working with is working on a toolkit for young folks. Before working in tech, I lived in New York for the last 3 years and worked in education with an organization there. And so I'm very dedicated and really care a lot about how young folks can learn about and share this knowledge with each other. So what we're working to build is a youth toolkit that is a collaborative living document for young folks and for adults to learn more about the topics in this book, teach them to each other, and continue disseminating this information. So far, the group is a handful of us breaking down ideas such as definitions that are really important from the book. There's going to be discussion questions from each chapter, and then as well a directory of activists, academics, artists, and other resources that young folks could use to learn this information. But we are looking to bring on more young people to help advise us and really play a collaborative role in creating this toolkit. So I'm not going to go too far into what that might look like. It really limit and what you would want to do, but we would love to have you involved in whatever way you're interested. I will also drop a link in the chat in a moment with my email address so you can copy paste. Just send me an email and we can go from there. And before I wrap up, I want to do a quick little plug for a program that we're launching as well with my company, 2Swim, called New Community Builders. And it's a summer program, 7 weeks for free for young people 15 to 20 in the United States and Canada who are interested in learning to grow their own online communities. There are going to be workshops, guest speakers, and one-to-one mentorship. And then this group will also play somewhat of a role in that in the toolkit as well. But there's no obligation to do one and the other. I just wanted to let some folks know. And I'll also be leading a session a little bit later on today, which will have more information about that. So again, I'm going to drop my email and my email and a link to the Community Builders program. But we would love to have you get involved and work with us on the Algorithms of Oppression Toolkit. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mica. If we have any questions for Mica, please go ahead and put them in our chat. And again, if you have any questions for any of the presenters that we've had today. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Thank you to all 4 of our presenters for today. We invite everyone to make it back over the sessions and see what else is happening. And please just continue to enjoy today's Youth Summit. Thank you so much, everyone.